and welcome to the ninth episode of the Martial Perspective. Today, I have Master Larry Sanford from the Oriental Martial Arts College in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, and that's located at 1349 Bryce Road, Reynoldsburg, Ohio, 43068. Hi, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, sir? Thank you
Uh,
for having me.
Absolutely. Love getting to know more martial artists, and this is a great venue to do so. So you are a sixth dan. You started your martial arts career in 1983 under Master David White, correct, sir?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you later joined the Ohio State University Taekwondo Club led by Grandmaster Ho B. Kim.
That's correct.
Okay. And you are the past president of the Ohio State Taekwondo Association.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Wow. And you currently teach Oriental Martial Arts College, founded by Eternal Grandmaster Jun P. Che, who held the Battle of Columbus, which is the Arnold Classic. Correct.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Sir. And you're currently studying with Grandmaster Scott Schwab with developing a better Hapkido program for your school.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So, actually, one of your instructors, I've judged with him at the Ohio State Taekwondo state championships in both AAU and USAT. Master Stephen Potter.
Yes.
Fantastic fellow. I'd love to have him on as soon as I can too.
Yes. I know him. I know him well. I remember him coming up through the ranks, and I remember him earning his black belt and then going up through the years as well. He and I have, been to a lot of the different seminars together. I think he started a little bit after I did, but then he ended up actually passing me up in the referee program with USAT, because after COVID, I kind of I didn't do as much with the Ohio State Taekwondo Association. I know that for a while I helped Master Justin Taylor with the State Taekwondo Association. Since I was the past president, helped him get things going, and it didn't happen. But then the State Taekwondo Association turned over to Grandmaster C.K. Lee, who is now running it, and I think Master Potter is also one of the officers in that corporate with that entity, and it seems to be doing well at this point.
Right. Well, as I understand, I know Master Taylor was trying to form some sort of partnership with AAU through USAT, and that kind of fell flat on its feet. But I just did recently see last week where AAU and USAT have formed some sort of an alliance. I didn't read too much into it, but I know that they're coming to some sort of agreement. Do you know anything about that?
I don't really. I've been kind of disconnected with the sport aspect of the art since I last worked with Master Taylor. I've been really focused on my Hapkido training, and then also teaching at the school. So I'm glad. I know that that's been kind of an ongoing thing. The two organizations trying to be unified, much like the International Taekwondo Federation and the World Taekwondo Federation. It has never really happened, but it seems like, at least with respect to the sports aspects of the art, I think it's likely, and I think it makes sense.
So you've been in Taekwondo a long time. What Kwan do you belong to, if you don't mind me asking, sir?
Songmukwon.
Songmukwon. Okay. So you're one of the Kwans that are still pretty strong and prevalent. I mean, I'm not saying that there's Kwans out there that's not prevalent, but one of the things that kind of interests me is the fact that you got USAT, you got AAU, and they're pushing the sport aspect of Taekwondo. And the sport aspect is governed by the Kukiwon. They tell you what forms you can do and what forms you can't do, and things like that for at least the Olympics and things like that.
Correct.
But I guess one of my biggest question is 20 years from now, you have the nine kwans. You got, Jita Kwan, Songmu Kwan, Muda Kwan, all these different Kwans, right?
Hmm.
And you have these masters that are passing away. But most of these schools, if they want to be relevant and they want their kids to compete, they have to learn the sport aspect, which is the Taeguk forms and, the Kukiwan forms.
Correct.
What do you think's, in your opinion, what do you think's going to happen to all these Kwans that, uh, aren't like Tang Sudo and Songwoo Kwon and Jito Kwon and all these that have their specific black belt forms that are a little bit different than the Kukiwon forms? Do you think eventually that's going to kind of fade out, or?
No, I don't. And the main reason why I don't think it's going to fade out is, there are, you know, when Grandmaster Che, was teaching, and he was still around. We learned a lot of the traditional forms. We did the Palgues, we did the Pyongons, and then we also did a lot of the forms that have the Shotokan roots.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Basak, Basak So, Basak De, Rohai, Chogi, all those forms, and those forms, still seem to be practiced with a lot of the different traditional schools, a lot of the ones that still, you can still have the sport aspects of the art, you can still compete
Hmm.
and things, but a lot of places, like even AAU, has open form divisions. So if you do a traditional form, you can still go to an AAU tournament and compete in it. You're just not going to be competing um, at the international level with that type of competition, but you would be competing potentially at the state level, potentially at the national level. And I also heard that AAU is now also opening up the possibility of having a ITF um, competitive division as well, so you can do the ITF forms, which don't necessarily compete with the World Taekwondo Federation forms, nor the traditional Shotokan based forms. But that's also another option that makes me think those are alive and well. And a lot of those students, a lot of students like me will continue to teach those forms,
Hmm.
and we will continue to teach those to students, and we will continue to have those forms passed on to those students. So I don't see those forms dying. I see those forms not necessarily being, how do I want to say this, not necessarily being
At the
as much
forefront.
into the official competition, unless those rules change, but they'll still be a part of competition, and you still have a lot of smaller tournaments that aren't necessarily sanctioned by AAU or USAT, where those forms are still options. I know that Grandmaster Schwab held the Buckeye Classic for a number of years. I know that Grandmaster Merzda holds a tournament. I know there
Okay.
are other tournaments that are around. There's some karate tournaments that are around where you can do a lot of those karate based forms, even though they've been adapted for the Taekwondo students, if you will.
Hmm.
They're still there, and they still are the same forms, because I've done a lot of these forms with a lot of the different karate masters, and they're you have no doubt that they're the same form, or they have the same origin. They just have slightly different appearance, slightly different background, and a lot of that depends on the philosophy of the style. Even within the kwans, you see a difference in the style.
Oh,
If you watch a Slamu Kwan person do a form, and then you watch a Mudo Kwan person do the same form, and a Tong Sudo person doing the same form, they're all going to look a little bit different.
yes.
And I remember when I first started going to a tournament and watching somebody that I didn't know do a form, and one of my seniors at the time pointed out to me, "Oh, that's so and so student, because so and so student does these forms this way."
Hmm.
So he knew by looking at the stylistic elements, which master was the one that taught the person that did the form.
Interesting.
So I mean, you still see some of that, and you also see some stylistic, some stylistic differences. Even when I train with Grandmaster Schwab, I'll watch some of his students do a lot of the same forms that I know, and yeah, they look. You can tell they're the same form, but they have different timing, different speed, slightly different setups, slightly different chambering, and things like that. But it's still essentially the same form. If
Now,
I did it and they did it alongside me, you could tell it
right
was the same form.
now, being it that I mean, you're heavily prevalent as a USAT referee and AAU referee and judge. I've judged a little bit, and I find it somewhat difficult to put one style up against another style because I know what you're supposed to judge on. You're supposed to judge on, you know, spirit, enthusiasm, and things like that. Power and
Hmm.
speed and all that control. You find it difficult to pair one quan up with another quan doing a form. Do you find it difficult to judge that at times?
It can be, um, but a lot of times too, you're still measuring an individual practitioner
Hmm.
against another practitioner who both of whom are similar in rank, similar in age, similar in, supposedly similar in ability.
Yeah,
Um,
you run into that. You run into some stuff with that where somebody may compete at a blue belt. You see them later on as a red belt and things like that. I understand
right.
100% what you're saying.
Right. But when you watch those students, a lot of times, I mean, I've had people that are from my own school that are doing things that were doing the form the way that I taught it. But then I watch somebody from another school do the form, and their intensity, their power, their enthusiasm, their energy is better. So, the better student is the one who won.
Yes, sir.
I didn't, if you're on side by side, and the student on your left is by far better, even though they're roughly the same rank.
Hmm. Right.
The right student should win under those contexts. Now, I do remember the time when um you had a homeschool advantage, so to speak. But those days are, for the most part, gone,
Right.
or at least it's less prevalent. I mean, especially when you're getting into, the USAT, AAU, because you're bringing in, a lot of different referees from different states, different backgrounds, and everything else. So they don't necessarily carry the biases. I mean, you know, back when I first started, everybody that came in from 4 or 5 different schools,
Hmm.
and then we had the tournament, and most of the black belts judging were with the master who was holding the program or
Right.
holding the event. So there was more of a home field advantage, if you will,
Hmm.
than what there is now. So I don't think you see that as much as you did 30 years ago.
Yes, sir. So, going into your lineage, tell me a little bit about Grandmaster Jun Piche, Eternal Grandmaster Jun Piche. He recently passed away a couple years ago.
Correct.
I know that.
Correct.
I met him a few times. Actually, my very first tournament ever was the Battle of Columbus, which was overwhelming to think about it walking into that. I was an adult
Mhm.
student. I started Taekwondo real late in life, and I'm a third Dan black belt now. I'm tested for master this year. Um,
Nice.
but I walked in there as a yellow belt, and I was blown away. I'm like, I don't know what to expect. But then I see this short Korean man walking around with this real elaborate robe, and I've come to find out that was ninth on Grandmaster Junpei Che.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
actually, I think he got 10th on before he passed away. Correct?
He did. His teacher, you know, conferred the ninth on rank onto him, or 10th on rank. I'm sorry, onto onto him. He asked him to carry on the lineage of the Song
Mhm.
and so he had assumed that he had assumed that position at his teacher's request. And he basically though when he passed away, I think um, I think Supreme Grandmaster Rowe's son, he Sang Rowe also assumed has now assumed that role.
Oh, wow.
But they have, it's a whole nother, he Grandmaster Che, he did obviously assume the 10th on role. He was working on gathering up all the Sun Quan masters, trying to unite them and create a place where everybody could, all the Sun Quan practitioners could come together and and have and practice and train and everything else, because he was big on the idea of bringing all the martial arts together. But then he was also that was the Battle of Columbus. The idea was that you brought in, we had people that were competing in karate, you had people that were competing in taekwondo, you had people who were tang soo do, you had
Oh, massive.
sambo, you had a whole bunch of different boxing, kickboxing.
Yeah, it was so big it had to be multiple different venues there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was huge. I mean, I remember when he first, well, not when he first started, but when it was at its height, it was in one of those large rooms in the Columbus Convention Center
Hmm.
that, was probably, it was a huge ballroom basically,
Right.
full of, full of multiple rings. I mean, even at these last few rounds of the Battle of Columbus, they were in a whole building at the fairground, the agricultural building at the fairground, and it was huge. And I mean,
Right.
you had multiple martial arts, coming together, and you had multiple people with multiple different skill sets. And the other thing that he started doing was having seminars for those people. So you could come in and I remember sitting in on a salat seminar. I remember training with somebody who um a lot of different people from a lot of different martial arts. I would sit in on some of those different seminars that I had never trained in before. And what was really neat was you could see the similarities in what they taught to what you've already learned,
Hmm.
but then you also would see some different angles and some different perspectives on some of the same ideas. And of course that also enhances your own understanding, because then you see a different perspective of something that you've already kind of learned, and
Hmm.
then it makes you think about things a little bit differently. It makes you think about the approach on certain things a little bit differently. It makes you think a little bit about, a little bit differently about the techniques,
Hmm.
and then you're just talking with different instructors. I mean, even within the Song Muquan groups, I mean, we talked with, with different masters and grandmasters, and, they came from, from all over the place. And, we all kind of talked about things that were kind of, I guess I would say, kind of school secrets, you know, in the 70s and 80s. 70s were before my time, but the 80s, would have been my time. They were kind of viewed as school secrets, and now, those are kind of being openly shared. So it's kind of cool to see how that part of things, has also changed.
Well, one thing I find funny, I just went to the World Grandmasters Expo, the gathering of the Grandmasters up in Michigan.
Uh-huh.
Um, Grandmaster AJ Perry invited our group to go, and we went and we trained. We trained with a bunch of different people, including Bill Superfoot Wallace,
Uh-huh.
Grandmaster Bill Superfoot Wallace, and it was
Mhm.
a phenomenal event. But as I'm standing there, I'm in a room with maybe 150 people, this big giant room. So it started out with Bill Superfoot Wallace teaching the first hour, and then we got to pick our different types of seminars. So we all split off and went to different rooms for different seminars, and we went back for another Superfoot hour, and then we broke off to do another seminar, and then we came back to finish off with Grandmaster Wallace. So
Right.
it was really, really interesting to me because we had karate, we had taekwondo, we had all these different practices, and we're doing these seminars. So we're learning waza. I didn't know what waza was. I'm not a karate guy. I'm a taekwondo guy. But
Right.
I'm standing there and I'm looking around the room, and it was funny to me because I saw maybe two Asian people in that whole seminar, and I'm starting to realize this more. And thinking back, like AAU and USAT, I don't see a whole heck of a lot of Asian masters at these events. I mean, why do you suppose that is?
I mean, I think now I think you're getting into a lot of these students, had or a lot of these masters I know had a lot of non-Asian students,
Right.
and a lot of those non-Asian students became masters, grandmasters,
Hmm.
what have you, and then they started teaching and continued teaching, and they would be teaching in their communities, and the people that are in their communities joined
Hmm.
their schools. And Asians are still overall a minority in our population,
Yeah.
an ethnic minority. So I think, the fact that you have more and more, I think, I think you are going to have, the a lot of non-Asians doing a lot of the Asian arts, and that just shows the art is spreading, in a positive way. It's spreading
Absolutely.
to all
Absolutely.
different ethnicities. I mean, there didn't used to be a lot of African American practitioners either,
No, that
and
really
there's
boomed.
a very large number now.
Yes.
And there's actually some of the karate schools that I know have a large number of African American champions,
Yeah.
and a lot of our OMAC had Grandmaster Greg Fears.
Hmm.
He was one of Grandmaster Che's students. He was one of the. I never actually knew him when he was a competitor at the school, but I know a lot of people that did, and they said that he was phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Like I said, I never met him. I've met him a couple times, but I can't say that I know him because he probably left 5 years before I came to the school to start training.
Hmm. Well,
Uh, so
so switching gears a little bit. So you're a Hapkido guy. Can you tell me the difference between Hapkido and Taekwondo? I know they're both Korean disciplines.
Mhm.
I don't know how similar they are. I mean, I know that I've done Hapkido break falls, which differ from the regular break falls that we do,
Mhm.
but I don't know much about it. I know I've seen a little bit of it on TV, but I don't know. Is it as popular as Taekwondo? Like, what's the difference, sir?
It's definitely not as popular from the sport aspect, because the way that Hapkido was designed and the way Hapkido was intended, it was intended. It was another military art. It was designed in part for the military. It was also designed in part for the police,
Hmm.
to use those. So there's a lot of law enforcement aspects. A lot of the locks and the holds and the controls are designed for law enforcement. But then, the other way that it's also evolved as well is also that it's becoming, to me, it's becoming a form of self-defense. With Taekwondo, when you compete in Taekwondo, you're competing against somebody your size, your age, your belt level, your skill level.
Yes.
When you're out in a self-defense situation, chances are pretty good that the person who has selected you as a target is bigger, stronger, and younger than you,
Well, people tend to prey on the weaker, if you will, and
or who they perceive as weaker. Yeah.
correct.
I mean, people look at me and they see an older guy. Um, but if they came after me, they would find out that I'm not as harmless as I appear.
Yeah, I don't want to come after you. I don't want to get Hapkido.
but the idea being that, you learn these techniques, you learn these pressure points, you learn these unbalancing aspects, and those things equalize, the difference. I mean, the techniques that I show, I have a 15-year-old girl who can throw me
That's awesome.
like a rag doll. In the classes, I have a 12 or 13-year-old boy that's in the classes who can throw me.
I bet that
You know,
doesn't feel good.
no, I mean, it's awesome that they know how to do it.
Right.
And you learn, when you're teaching, you're basically taking the strength out of the equation. You're using strikes that, I always tell the story. I remember one time I was holding my son when he was 6 months old. He's now 18, but he was 6 months old at the time. And I was holding him. And if you've ever held a baby when they're about 6, 8 months old, they will tend to want to move and move their head around. And he hit me in the head with the back of his head and bloodied my nose.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, if he's capable of doing that at his size, there's not a person out there that's not capable of bloodying nose
Right.
if they want to.
Hmm. You're right.
So the idea being that if somebody attacks you and you have a technique that you know how to do well, you can hit that person and you can cause enough damage to at least slow them down,
Absolutely.
which then allows you to get away. I mean, no self-defense situation is absolutely 100% foolproof. But through training you can eliminate a lot of the risks of something that could possibly happen through observation, through other things. But then if the worst case scenario happens and you do end up involved in a situation where you have to defend yourself, then you know what to do. I mean, I know that you have said before you're in a law enforcement background,
Yes, sir.
and there's no way to absolutely guarantee anybody's safety.
Mm-mm.
And people who think that they've guaranteed their safety through any kind of training has either lied to themselves or somebody has lied to them.
Well, that's the people that are going to get hurt first, honestly, sir.
Correct, I agree.
And
And
I don't take anybody for granted. If I'm working, I absolutely take zero for granted because you know what? Any given day, any person can can take you down. And the ultimate thing, I want to go home at the end of the day. That's my
correct,
ultimate goal. I don't care how I get there. I'm going home.
absolutely, absolutely. And by and a lot of the skills that we talk about is, we talk a lot about, obviously, once something gets physical, what you do, but up to that point, all the things you can do to avoid a confrontation. I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the last 20 years, 30 years, I've been in situations that could have very easily led into physical confrontations, but you diffuse them.
Right.
I mean, I'm a workers' comp lawyer giving people very bad news for a living
Right.
a lot of times. And when you're dealing with people, you have to know how to handle them. You have to know how to manage conflict, or something as simple as somebody thinks you cut them off in the parking lot.
Oh,
How do you handle it? Here, you want the spot? You can have it. I'll move.
yeah. A simple apology goes a long way with most people, not everybody, I would say.
Not everybody, but in those situations, you've done everything you could possibly do, and if worse comes to worse, you run.
Right.
I'm not afraid to run.
Right. It's not a
Um,
form of weakness either.
no, it's a form of smartness.
Correct.
I mean, to me, it's smart if you're in a situation and you think you can run, you do it. I mean, if I have my wife and my kids with me and they can't necessarily run, I'm not going to run. But
Right.
but if it's just me, I'm going to.
No, I completely understand. So you've been in martial arts for quite some time. Actually, 1 year less than when I was born. I was born in
Oh,
1982. So, um, Hopefully, I don't make you feel too old, sir. But so, what was the biggest obstacle that you've encountered in your martial arts training? Be it health, be it something mental, but be it something financial. What is your biggest obstacle in martial arts, or that you've and how did you overcome this?
Biggest obstacle and how did I overcome it? When I first started competing, I, you know, I was very much in love with the idea of competing. Um, but then I watched some of these guys, especially back in the 80s, get knocked out,
Yeah.
get kicked off the floor. Um, and I knew going into those things that, there was a very real possibility that you could get hurt very badly.
Yes.
So the first several times I competed, I was very afraid. Um, and it's funny because I kept going in, I kept doing it, but I was also too stubborn to admit that I was afraid, if you will, of getting hurt. But as and when I trained in practice, I did everything fine because I didn't have that fear. But as well as anybody, when you have fear, all thinking shuts down.
Correct.
So, I was experiencing that in competition, that shutdown and that not thinking. So everything that I did before was gone.
Hmm.
And, I eventually learned, well, I'm not really in that much danger. I really can protect myself. I really know how to keep myself safe in this competitive environment. I know there are rules that are there that are going to help safeguard me and all that kind of stuff. So then as I started getting past that obstacle, I started experiencing some successes.
Hmm.
Then I started kind of moving along and continuing to improve. And once I got to a certain point where I had a certain level of comfort, that was also about the time that I decided I was going to start law school.
So you had to take a little break.
Yeah, so then I had to take a break for several years,
Hmm.
uh, because I worked full time and I went to law school at night. And then after I finished law school, I wasn't working in the Columbus area, so I couldn't really train, with Grandmaster Che at that time.
Hmm.
So I was training, with another local school, and then I ended up eventually coming back to Grandmaster Che. After several years, but I was away for a while, but by that point, you know, I was in my 30s. I was I was mentally I had matured, and everything at that point. So it was very easy for me to understand, where a lot of those things were coming from, and
Right.
a lot of those fears were coming from. And now when I talk to people, I one of the things that I talk about is your ability to overcome a lot of those fears. And a lot of that comes from, you have to be persistent, you have to be determined, you have to continue trying, even when it's hard. But once you break that, and once you break those fears, then you're not invincible, but you have a much better ability to manage your risks,
Hmm.
if you will, of fighting, with certain people, sparring with certain people, and that kind of stuff. But then when you switch over to the self-defense aspect, you're taking all these rules that were in competition and they're gone.
Right.